Hey everyone, welcome to yet another edition of The Overtime. Our big idea today is when we compromise in our faith, we crumble. When we trust in God, though, we triumph. And where we are picking up here, 700 BC or so, Israel is now gone. Assyria has essentially come in and completely besieged them. We are in 2 Kings 17 and 18. But before we go too in depth with the rest of the story, I want to talk to you about one of the most fascinating people groups in all of Scripture that gets started here. The genesis of this group of people is right here in 700 BC, and then we hear about it quite a bit in the New Testament, and Jesus has ordained for us to learn about this group of people. This specific group of people is the Samaritans. So in Luke 9, 51 through 53, Jesus is fixing to head to Jerusalem for his ministry. And it says in Luke 9, 51, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he, that's Jesus, set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him who went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. Okay, so he's heading down there, and it says, but the people did not receive him. That's kind of odd because his face was set toward Jerusalem. So during the time of Christ is where we're at right now, maybe 20 something, 30 AD or so. Now, the beginning of the Samaritans was at this time 700 BC. What's going on here in 20 something, 30 AD is that Jesus and his people are taking a trip to Jerusalem from Galilee. But the shortcut from Jerusalem to Galilee is to go through Samaria. And the Samaritans don't want to let Jesus and his friends stay there because they are Judeans. The Samaritans don't like the Judeans. Luke 9:54 says, and when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Now, if you've been with us in our walking through the Bible on Sundays, you know that they are referencing the time of the divided kingdom, which is where we are, but several decades before 700 BC, God used Elijah to call fire down from heaven to defeat the prophets of Baal and King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. So what James and John are doing is they're hoping that they can invoke this fire from heaven to burn up all these dirty, half-bred Samaritans. And I think that that's pretty hilarious. They're like, do you want us to take care of these losers? So let's go back to it again, verse 54 of Luke 9. It says, and when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? But look what Jesus says. But he turned and rebuked them, and they went to another village. So Jesus is like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to show off like that. We're not here for that. But it's really crazy that James and John, it's part of Jesus's inner circle, they feel that way about the Samaritans. Then later in John 4, Jesus meets the woman at the well. And so he goes to the well and she's there at the same time. Well, this woman at the well is a Samaritan. And Jesus says, woman, give me a drink of water. Now, in Fenton, Missouri in 2026, if I were to run into someone that I didn't know, a woman, and I said, woman, give me a drink of water, that would be entirely inappropriate, wouldn't it? But during this time, it was more customary for that type of conversation. And so Jesus says, woman, give me a drink of water. And she gets sassy. And she doesn't get sassy with Jesus because of the way he speaks. She gets sassy with Jesus because Jesus is a Jew and she is a Samaritan. So in John 4, she basically says something like this. You Jews never talk to Samaritans, and now you ask for a drink of water. Who do you think you are? And then Jesus later on in conversation ministers to her. And then Jesus specifically tells a story of the Good Samaritan. Everybody knows the term Good Samaritan, and that is because the people were self-righteous in who they were, and Jesus wanted to let them know it really doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, what your nationality is, what your previous religious affiliations are. If you're willing to listen to God and love people, then you're on my team. And so it's kind of fascinating, really. So back in 700 BC is the beginning of the Samaritans, these people that live in Samaria that have a mixed religion of Judaism and the religions of the Assyrians. And from here on out, the Jews who are from Judah don't like Samaritans. And the Samaritans who lived in Samaria, which once was part of Israel, but later gets taken over by Assyria and gets taken over by other kingdoms, they don't like the Jews. During Jesus' time, there are about 1 million Samaritans. Today, the Samaritans are a very small group of people, but they're very tight-knit. They even have their own ID cards. They believe in the first 5 books of the Bible, but they've got their own version of how they twist it and manipulate it. And today, there are about 800 or so left in that Israel region, but they don't claim to be Palestinians and they don't claim to be Israeli. And so a very unique group of people. So that's the Samaritans. But what I want to spend more time focusing on today is how the enemy seeks to deceive us and how the enemy seeks to defeat us. So first off, the way the enemy seeks to defeat you and I is he's always thriving on fear and chaos. I think about our war with Iran right now. It's clearly obvious that Iran has lost their power, they have lost their influence, they've lost everything, but they continue to fight and they continue to hurl threats against anyone that comes against them. And the reasons are two. Number one, they've got nothing to lose. They've already lost everything. So they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And number two, they want to create chaos because chaos creates division and it destroys lives. And so that's why Iran and all of its little shell organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of those, that's why they exist. And that's why they keep fighting, and they are probably going to fight and they are going to stir up trouble until Jesus comes back. That's just how it's going to be. But that's how the enemy works. The enemy doesn't give up. They always want to create chaos. In 2 Kings 18, we see how Assyria is now bearing down on Jerusalem. And they have this guy, Assyria, called the Rabshakeh. The Rabshakeh is their ambassador. He is their great spokesperson. And the Rabshakeh and a couple other guys come to have a conversation with Hezekiah. And Hezekiah sends out some members of his cabinet to have a conversation with them before they decide to attack and try to besiege Jerusalem, which is the capital of Judah. 2 Kings 18:26 says, Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah, that's Hezekiah's cabinet, said to the Rabshakeh, Please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in this language of Judah, Hebrew, within the hearing of the people who are on the wall. So what is going on here is Hezekiah's cabinet is meeting with Assyria's cabinet and the Rabshakeh, and they say, Rabshakeh, we would really appreciate if you would honor us in this conversation and have an Aramaic conversation, because the Aramaic conversation is a higher security level. So the people, the common folk, won't understand our conversation. So Rabshakeh, if you would please keep it in Aramaic, that will keep us from having chaos and putting fear into the hearts of our people, because we don't want fear and chaos into the hearts of our people. But the Rabshakeh, he hears this and he says, you know what? Because you said that, I want to speak in the people's language because I want to incite fear and chaos, and we want to destroy you, and we want to conquer you. So the Rabshakeh was once addressing Hezekiah's cabinet. Now the Rabshakeh is addressing the cabinet, but addressing all of the onlookers as well. And he insists to speak in Hebrew in order to incite fear, division, and chaos within all of the people. And this is further on what the Rabshakeh says, 2 Kings 18:31. Then each of you will eat of his own vine. So the Rabshakeh is like, surrender to us, and this is what you'll get. Each of you will eat of his own vine, and each of you his own fig tree, and each one of you will drink the water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die. I think it's kind of funny how the Rabshakeh is saying you're going to live comfortably and you're going to have your own cistern and your own trees and your own vineyards. You're going to have everything. Everything's going to be free. The government's going to take care of you. We've got all the handouts you could ever want. And then we're going to take you away to this magical land of Assyria. Remember how Assyria took the Israelites? They put hooks in their noses and dragged them all the way over to Nineveh. So clearly, the enemy here is painting a clear, not a clear, but a more exciting, rosy, more fantastic picture than what's actually going to happen. But that's what the enemy does. The enemy was doing this in Genesis chapter 3 with Adam and Eve. The enemy's doing it in 700 BC. And the enemy does that today in 2026 AD to you and I. He's always saying, follow me and you'll have it your way. And then he says this. Rabshakeh says, and do not listen to your leader Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying the Lord will deliver us. So now he's sort of gaslighting the people, right? And he says, has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his hand out of the hand of Assyria? Where the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim and Hena and Eva? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? And so what the Rabshakeh is saying, we've done nothing. All we do is win, 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 no matter what. And no other gods are going to get in our way. Why would you listen to Hezekiah? You already saw what we did up there in Israel, so you might as well just give in. The enemy loves to do that. Now this echoes back to Genesis chapter 3, doesn't it? In the way that the serpent tempted Eve. The way that the serpent tempted Eve is, did God really say that? God didn't really say that. And that's essentially what the Rabshakeh is saying. Hezekiah doesn't really hear from God. And then the serpent says to Eve, did God really say that? And then he says, if you eat of this tree, you won't die. Your life will actually get better. Your eyes will be opened. That's literally what the Rabshakeh is saying. If you give in to us, you're going to have a prosperous life and all of your wildest dreams will come true. So it's really a callback to Genesis 3 and several other stories in Scripture. But also for me, as a little bit of a Star Wars nerd, it kind of reminds me of how Senator Palpatine drew in Anakin. Anakin was drawn in, and it seemed like the loving thing to give in to the senator, and then Anakin becomes Darth Vader. And then what does Darth Vader do? Darth Vader tries to draw in Luke Skywalker, and he says, join the dark side and all of your problems will work out. The dark side is fun. The dark side is powerful. The dark side is safer. And it would be more loving for you to join the dark side than to stay with the rebels. This is the type of thing that Satan does in many different ways. I mean, Satan made a promise to Adam and Eve, which was a lie. Satan used the Sanhedrin to make a promise to Judas when Judas betrayed Jesus. And we've also got to remember the time where Satan appealed to Jesus in the wilderness when Jesus was starving and weak, and Satan said, why don't you make some bread for yourself? Why don't you, take yourself from this situation and, become God? Or why, if you bow down to me, then I'll give you everything that you ever wanted. I mean, Satan essentially did all of those things to Jesus as well. Now Satan speaks to us in different ways. Satan says, you know what? You got better things to do than to go to church or to go to small group. I mean, you've got an income, you've got kids, you've got a life to live. I mean, coming to church, you can't do that. Satan is lying to us all the time in subtle ways like that. Satan will also say, yeah, you're going to be fine in eternity. You can get to heaven by being a good person. Just do you and you'll be fine. Satan loves that lie because he knows that you'll be with him in hell if you buy into it. Satan also says things like God is dead. God doesn't care. Christians are ignorant and they're uneducated. God can't really be trusted, or God can't really be known. or Jesus didn't rise again, or the authority of the Bible isn't really real. There's so many translations and there's so many years that have gone by, you can never really believe in it. Look what it says in 1 John chapter 2. It says, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. Anytime Satan tries to appeal to these three areas of your life, you know it's Satan, basically. He appeals to the desires of your flesh. You know you feel it. You want it so bad. It'll make you feel so good if you take it. That's not going to be from God. That's going to be from the enemy. What about the desires of the eyes? You see that and it's so appealing and something you fantasize about. Just go out and take it for yourself. Don't pray about it. Just take it for yourself and you'll be happy. That's not going to be from God. That's from the enemy as well. And then lastly, the pride of life. Do your own thing. Don't ask God. Don't invite God to the party. Be your own boss. Those are not things from God. But these are the things, I mean, I'm a pastor, and I feel like the enemy and the systems of the enemy are crying out to me in those three areas. Satan can't be more than one place. He's not omnipresent. But he does have a lot of fallen angels under his command, and he also has an entire system of the world that he uses and manipulates. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, Paul writes that Satan is the prince of the powers of the air. That's kind of a big deal. That's a lot of power. That's more power than I have and than you have if we don't have God on our side. John 12:31, Jesus references Satan as the ruler of this world. That's saying a lot for Jesus to say. He's the ruler of this world. And that's because God has allowed it and Jesus has allowed it. And Satan has a lot of authority. He's got a lot of clout and he speaks to our flesh and he knows just how to do it. We've only been alive. I've been alive. You've only been alive for a few decades. Satan's been around for millennia. And so he's got this thing down. He knows how to deceive the flesh. And so in Genesis 3 with the serpent and 700 BC with the Rabshakeh and today in 2026 for you and I, the enemy knows exactly what to do. Look what it says in Ephesians 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. In other words, we're not fighting against each other, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness. Cosmic powers, that could be spirits. It could be all this alien talk that's going on right now as well. We're not going to get into that today. But the two things I wanted to point out, it says against the rulers and against the authorities. That this is important because God has ultimate control over everything. But Satan has come in and he has set up and influenced rulers and authorities. These are people in high power positions of entertainment, business, government, education, medical field, all of these different areas. Satan's like, you know what? I need to take domain over these things so I can have influence, not just over those people, but over the policies that outlive the people. Paul is speaking about the earthly power that Satan has. And Satan has a system. And his system is designed to do two things. Number one, if you are weaker in the faith or you let your guard down, Satan can draw you away from God. He can get you focused on other things. He can get you doing the wrong things. He can get you indulging in secret sins, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. He can get you caught up in that. But another thing the enemy can do is he can distract us. If he can't defeat us, he's seeking to distract us. So, born again believers, he wants to get you angry. He wants to get you divided. He wants you to get you off your A game. He wants to get you so you're so busy that you skip your time in prayer and you're focused just on what's in front of you instead of on God. We've got to understand that Satan desires to do these things. Just like the Rabshakeh was trying to deceive the people of Judah, Satan is trying to deceive you and I, and it's very real. This isn't just a story. This is the real thing. So I'm not telling you that every ruler and every authority on earth is controlled by Satan, but I would say a lot of them are. A lot of them are. So what do we do about that? Well, we've got to keep our eyes on Jesus first and foremost. Number two, we got to pray. We got to pray for discernment. We've got to even pray for those people that are clearly living against God's design. There are a lot of business leaders, influencers, entertainers, and people in government that are living against God's design, and they're setting up policies that clearly go against God's design, and it's causing the degradation of our society. So we have got to be strong in our faith, keep our eyes on Jesus. We have got to pray. And number three, I'm just going to come out and say it. We got to vote. You got to vote. We need born again believers to vote, and we need to vote for people that are either Christian or, number two, at least their policies work with God's design. We got to stop voting for people that make us feel a certain way or that say a certain thing, because look at what the Rabshakeh does here. He knows what to say and how to say it. When someone is so good with their words and so smooth, that might be a sign that, I need to look back. I need to look at their policy. I need to look at their track record. I need to look at who I'm trusting and who I'm following. So we've got to keep these things in mind, because we are in a very real spiritual battle every single day. So let's not lose our focus. So as the Rabshakeh speaks to the people of Judah, I love the response. Instead of fighting back, instead of following Assyria and buying into the lies, instead, they are just silent. It reminds me of what it says in Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. Be still. And next week's message, in a couple weeks' message, we're going to hear how that is ultimately going to work out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us for the overtime. I'll see you later.